All right. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome on our
Hello.
webinar. The ultimate guide to hiring in Spain will still be welcoming a few people over the next few minutes. However, in order to be nice with the people that manage to be here on time, we're going to get started because we have a packed agenda. We have a lot of stuff to discuss, and we want to leave room for questions. So we will get started right now. Once again, welcome everyone onto this webinar. I hope you're as excited as I am to discuss the ultimate guide on hiring into Spain. What we're going to cover today is pretty, to use a tech analogy, it's pretty full stack webinar in the sense that we're going to start by discussing why is hiring into Spain that popular? Why has it been popular the past few years, right? And then we're going to go step by step to say, how can you hire into Spain? How can you find quality candidates and how you can hire them into Spain? We're going to give you some insights about the average benefits and information on how to pay and how to compensate people you want to hire in Spain, and then how you contractualize, how you employ them afterwards. But before we get started on all of this, I'd love to give a chance to welcome our guest speakers there, Pedro and Cristina. Cristina, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself to the audience?
Hi everyone, thank you Virgil. So I'm Cristina, hiring success lead at Oyster. I'm an Italian living in Madrid already 10 years, so I think I can give you some good insight about what it means living here.
Cool.
Pedro?
So I think my video is dropping a bit. It's only for me. It's for you, Brigitte and Christina. Are we fine?
It's dropping a bit from time to time, but
Okay.
it's not too bad, Pedro.
Okay. Cool. Well, I'm Pedro. I'm the co-founder and CEO at Circular. I'm Spanish, so I've been living here for a while now. Not that I'm that old. Yeah. Well, Circular, we're basically a job board, Circular job board for tech people. So I will be talking about hiring.
And I will finish by presenting myself. So I'm Virgil Arja. I'm CEO and co-founders of Figures. At Figures, we try to help companies define fair and efficient compensation policy. And we do so by starting with aggregating market data from nearly 1,200 companies now all over Europe, including in Spain, in order to bring insights for company on how to compensate people fairly. And we're going to start right. We're going to get right into the topic of the webinar. But before we get into the how we can hire people in Spain, how much to pay them, and so on, let's start. And Pedro is going to start on why is Spain such a hot area right now? Why has it been over the past few years? Pedro, over to you. Tell us more.
Thank you, thank you. Well, we like to say like three main sort of topics making Spain a great hiring destination right now. The first one is I'm not gonna lie, it's a great place to live and work. We have a lower cost of living compared to other European cities. If you think about, for instance, rent, if you take a 50 square meter sort of apartment in Madrid, you're talking about 700, 800 euros per month. If you compare that to Paris or London, where it's probably doubling that, right? If I'm not mistaken. On top of that, we have a pretty good and comprehensive public healthcare system that makes the private options also very cheap. So we got covered there. And yeah, you can also get tan in Spain. We have over 3,000 hours of sun in Spain. It's a really nice place to get your outdoor time too. On top of this, more qualitative and life side of things, you also have favorable labor laws and cost, I would say. It has been recently introduced this new startup law by the Spanish government, making things a little bit easier for tech companies. On one hand, you have the digital nomad visa, which makes being a Spanish resident much easier for people employee in tech companies. We also changed how the stock option regulation works. In the past, most companies had to rely on phantom shares to avoid, aggressive taxing in the moment of granting the stock options. That changed recently. So we can rely on a stock option, and we also increase the tax exemption for option for shares. On top of that, in terms of labor costs, we are also 15-60% lower than the European Union average. And then the labor laws for people hiring, I would say, is fairly fast, because the notice period is only 15 days. So you can get someone to start at your company in Spain in 2-3 weeks fairly easily. And on top of that, when you have to fire someone, can be do like sort of a one-side decision without any negotiation, done on the spot, and with the severance pay that goes from 20 to 30 days per year working the company, with an usual sort of period of 6 months to a year where you don't have to pay any severance at all. So I would
And
say,
Pedro,
yeah.
let me interrupt you there. On the notice period of 15 days, right? I'm speaking from a French person whose use is that normally it's like 3 months in France notice period, right? And when I started hiring to Spain, I actually negotiated a longer notice period because I felt it was a risk as a business to have 2 weeks. Is that standard that people negotiate more than 15 days, or that like really most people don't negotiate as part of their employment contract more than 2 weeks?
I honestly don't see that put in the contract employments a lot, but I would say there's a lot of goodwill when someone is leaving to
Okay.
extend that over to a month.
Okay.
It's completely up to the employee actually to grant that option. I particularly feel, and also hire in other places where the notice period is longer, that probably after a month, the employee that already knows that is leaving is not being very productive. So I don't know extending that, past 1 month, if that's very productive. But that's probably another conversation to have.
Yep.
If I can add something here, usually it's like 1 month, but only for senior roles. Like
Okay.
a director, usually this is standard, but for like medium roles, yes, this is the general notice period.
And the sort of third factor that comes into play is that our tech ecosystem is growing. On top of having two big tech hubs that probably most of you know, Madrid and Barcelona. Barcelona used to be the preferred option for international companies to set their tech hubs in, which makes sense because of the sun and the weather is nicer than Madrid. It is true that Madrid is growing a lot in the recent years too as a destination for opening hubs. And we have emerging sort of cities like Valencia, Malaga, and Bilbao. For instance, there's a huge cybersecurity center opened by Google in Malaga during the last year, and that's going to happen more and more. On top of that, not only the tech hubs, but the companies in Spain are also growing. So we have more unicorns leading the way, and you are able to hire people that have done it before, right? As you have, I know, like the Globos, Cabify, Idealista, Job and Talents, like big companies that reach the unicorn status, are actually train people on how to do things properly, if I may say. On top of that, not only startups are growing, but also more investors are coming, more international investors are coming. I would say, I think it was 2020 data, but 80% of the Series A round were participated by international investors, and a lot of local VCs are growing and also putting money into the ecosystem so it can grow. So this is sort of the summary on why we believe you should seriously consider opening a hub in Spain. And if you have decided, like the regular thing to be asking is how or where do we start? And this is the main chunk of the presentation today. We're going to be talking, as Virgil was saying, on how to get candidates, how to compensate it, and how to employ them. I'm going to start on the first bit, which is actually how to find those candidates to hire. Like when you are entering a new hiring market, you usually face three issues. The first one is that unless you are a big consumer brand, you have low applications because your brand is unknown in this new country. You can always source, but you don't have a lot of reference for doing sourcing, right? Like, which are the companies that actually have like a solid customer success management practice that you can source people from, or which are the most solid engineering teams where I can find my net head of engineering. So you have a lot of local reference, but you not only don't have local reference, but you have a lot of insights that can be even cultural. What do people expect from a candidate experience point of view about benefits, how that differs from my home country. Um, what you do when you need help, if you may go, Nick, to the next slide. What you do when you need help in your local home is that in your local, sorry, town or countries, probably you rely on your peers. You ask for help, right? Like when you have some questions, or even when you want referrals for a specific position, is like the natural thing to do is rely on your peers, and that's basically what we scale in Circular. We have a network of 7,000 recruiters worldwide with a big presence in Spain. And we like to say that we're the first circular job board where the candidates are referred by the local recruiters. These companies interview talent that they like but eventually didn't hire and refer them to Circular. What we do is we introduce those candidates to you. That's a very nice and simple way without much local knowledge to find great talent. We wanted to share a small use case on how actually someone hired one of their engineers recently through Circular. This company is a German fund company where the recruiter at that time was in South Africa. They hire worldwide and want to have a stronger presence in Spain because of all the advantages that I share. So they just posted a job. We sent them active matching candidates that were referred by companies in the similar stage. So we look by candidates having referred by companies either in the same industry, the same size. They integrated with their ATS, so the process was seamless and easy for them, and they reach out to this candidate that we sent. 8 out of the 10 that they reach out actually answer, and they ended up hiring one of them without the need of having much local knowledge at that point. We also added like a small quote from the recruiter at Troop on why they also enjoy not only hiring to Circular, but referring candidates to Circular so their peers can interview and hire them too. And before moving into the compensation bit, we wanted also to share a few insights on hiring in Spain that comes directly from our community. We have a community in the platform where these recruiters that are part of Circular actually ask questions and answer questions from their peers. And we ask what are the nuances of hiring in Spain. And we also took a look at our data in terms of talent pool and came with a slide with a few insights I'm going to be sharing with you. If you go one slide ahead. So first of all, what you can expect from Spanish talent, right? I would say one thing that you can say about Spanish people, you probably can say some things that are not that nice, but if you go about nice things, we are very friendly and we are very outgoing. So you're going to build a strong culture with Spanish people. On top of that, we are very loyal employees. I was actually rehearsing this a bit with Brigitte yesterday and got me off guard with the exact data on how much longer the tenure of Spanish people are compared to the average of the European Union, and is around 15% more. If you're talking about the startup and startup employees and tech companies, I would say that culturally, being less than 2 years in a company is probably something that most people don't want to risk, because you are at risk of being considered some sort of a job hopper. I know that in other markets like London, 2 years in a company is already a long time. And also we
On
have
that,
like
Pedro, on that,
yeah,
let me interrupt you because
yes,
it's
please.
something we discussed briefly in the preparation, but my insight talking to a few non-Spanish based employers, so like companies that were like in London or in fact in Germany. There's quite a number of startups in Germany that have offices or are trying to employ
Mhm.
in Spain and so on. And that let's say that in the past few years, I don't know if that's changed. They were seeing a lot of job hopping into tech roles, like tech roles and customer support roles, because like salaries were getting higher and higher. I'm going to talk about salaries afterwards, right? and that they were going. There was a lot of frenzy for talents, especially like in Barcelona, and they were seeing a lot of attrition because there was people jumping from one company to another as salaries were getting higher. Is that a fair assessment? Is that maybe true before but not true today? What's your take on that?
I mean that's a fair assessment. As competition gets stiffer, right? Like people are more prone to change jobs. I think we are still a long way to go from other tech hubs in Europe, but especially in Barcelona, as I was mentioning before, is probably the preferred destination for international companies for open hubs, at least until for the last few years. It is true that competition is getting heavier. And probably the job tenure is getting a little bit lower. But my take is that still we are very far from what you see in markets like London, to be fairly honest.
Okay.
In terms of what candidates want and expect from companies in Spain, I'm not gonna lie. Like everywhere else, like people are not very happy about this partial going back to the office kind of thing that is happening. People want flexible work, either full remote or at least the possibility to work from home from time to time. On top of that, the private health insurance is something that tech companies are giving more and more. To give you, so you can compare with other countries, we give through Alan to our employees private health insurance, and it's less than 40 euros per month per employee. So I would say it's pretty competitive and already making a difference there. A couple of extra cultural things is that some companies we don't do this. I hope not a lot of circular employees actually see me here, but short Fridays. So Fridays afternoon off is also something cultural coming from probably bigger companies or corporates. Another thing that comes from them is this idea that people get meal or transport tickets or allowances to cover for. I know that's a thing also in France too, right, Brigitte?
Yep. Yep.
It's also a thing in Spain. And in terms of the talent pool, just really quick, what we see in our data, we are specialized in tech. I would say that the roles that are more difficult to fill as a reflection of the market, as probably the Ruby on Rails roles and the PHP, and also DevOps. We see a lot of job posted in DevOps in the platform, but also in the market, and not that many experienced people to cover them.
But one thing, Pedro, you went over quickly on the short Fridays things. I'm very intrigued about the short Fridays. Talk me more about the short Fridays as a necessary thing to implement for Spanish hires.
It's not a necessary thing, but it's gonna be a requested thing. I don't know how many offsite that has been brought up by the team. And truth is that some companies, especially corporates, Fridays afternoon are off. Um, in Spain, it is true that we end later during the week. So probably in the afternoon, you could see people leaving at 6, 7, something like that in some cases. But Fridays, people leave at 3 p.m. So you sort of extend your meal until 3:30. You understand that we Spaniards are okay with having lunch at that time. So you work until 3 p.m. and then you go out and have lunch with friends or even co-worker at that time, and you don't work for the rest of the afternoon.
Okay. Okay, pretty interesting.
Cool. So I'll leave you with Virgil. And we'll hop back in the Q&A part.
Okay. Then we discussed on like how to find candidates, and now the question, the big thing is like, okay, but then how do we pay them, and how much do we pay them? Right? It's pretty important question once you get to find candidates. A pretty important question, especially nowadays with the era of pay transparency coming in all over Europe. So how do you pay them? I love this topic, and I love this. We often get the question says, okay, what's the best way to do, and what's the most fair to do? Is that to pay everyone the same regardless in location, paying people the same in the UK, France, Germany, or Spain? Is there any other way? The first most important point, right? There's no ultimate fair decision, right? It's really an important point. There's no anyone that says the only fair thing to do is this. I think is lying because I think it's more of a company decision taking into consideration cultural belief and, to be honest, business obligations as well. because I love companies being like the only fair thing to do is to pay people the same. They're doing the same role, regardless of where they work in the world. Interestingly enough, it's often the US companies saying that because, of course, they have US revenue, high, lots of revenue coming in. They have the highest salary, some of the highest salaries in the world, in tech, the highest. And it's easy for them to say we can pay US salaries to everyone in the world, right? But it's super tough for companies elsewhere to do that. Let's say you're a Spanish company and you're like operating in Spain. You're like, okay, maybe I'm paying everyone the same regardless of location. Then you start opening up a French office where salaries are higher, like 15% higher. Then you open a UK office. Are you going to open to keep salaries the same? You're not going to pay them Spain or Spanish based rates, right? If not, you won't hire anyone. And when you open US offices, what do? Do you actually pay your entire company US based pay, or you pay them Spanish based pay and you won't hire anyone in the US? So it's a really tricky situation. And there's no fair thing to do. One fair thing to do could be to pay everyone the same, and other could argue, actually paying local rates ensure that for the same role, people in my company are having the same spending power or the same spending income, regardless of their location. Overall, they have a overall similar income, regardless of where they work. So there's no point number one, there's no ultimate fair thing. I'm going to outline a few options. I'm going to zoom in on like one option, particularly in the next few slides. Before I get into that, one point Nick mentioned in the chat. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat. We will have time for questions at the end, right? But if there's any relevant question to each section, please put them in the chat. We'll try to take them in as they go. So don't hesitate to use the chat for the questions. So three options when it comes to compensation. The first one, which is the most popular one and historically popular one, is localization of pay, where you pay people according to the location they're in. It used to be that it's like was more of a city-based approach. So you will pay people based on the cities they're in. It's becoming more and more of like a country-based approach. So like people Spanish rates or French rates or UK rates and so on. And we see that in our data in a way, because when company on board in two figures, they can select their compensation policies once they pay people per location or per country, or the highest paying city in the country, which is, for example, in our policy, if you hire someone in Spain, we're going to pay the highest rates in Spain, whether it's like Madrid or Barcelona. In France, we're going to pay Paris-based rates. In the UK, we're going to pay London-based rates for everyone in the UK. And there's also an approach where some companies are using a continental approach, meaning everyone in Europe, for example, gets paid London-based rates. Everyone in the US or North America gets paid San Francisco or New York-based rates, right? And like in the Asia, they get paid Singapore ones and so on. So it's getting also a bit more and more popular. The other approach I've talked about it is the easiest one to implement, like equal pay, right? Everyone gets the same salary regardless of location, with some of the challenges I discussed beforehand. And the last approach that honestly I don't see much, I see some companies doing it but don't see much, is cost-based approach. It's saying, okay, we're a London-based company or Berlin-based company. If we were to hire you as a candidate in Berlin, it would cost 60K with 30% employer cost on top of that. So roughly 82K total cost. Wherever you're going to work, your cost to the company should be 82K. So we're going to compute how much employer cost if you decide to work in Spain or in Portugal or in Italy, how much employer cost we have to pay, and we're going to deduct your salaries from that. So that's a cost to company approach should be equal wherever you work, right? And that's one way some companies are doing, but I don't see that as very popular thing to implement. Most companies, if you have to remember one, are doing the localizing pay. It used to be localizing per city. It's now localizing per country. I'm going to zoom in onto the localized pay approach, how to implement it, right? A very practical thing. The two ways to localize pay, the easiest one is to say, okay, I'm a, once again, Berlin-based company, and I want to, I have Berlin salary grid, so I know how much I should pay my employees in Berlin. I'm starting to hire into Spain. I'm going to take whatever I want to hire into Berlin, and I'm going to convert that into Spain. The second approach, which is like the location factor approach in a way, that has been made popular by GitLab in the past, then remote and stuff like that. The second approach is the salary ranges using local data to build salary ranges, which is probably the best approach, but we're going to get to that afterwards, right? Let's zoom in onto the approach of like location factor. It's the easiest solution to implement because it means you start off salaries in the location you know, probably the location of your headquarters. You use a location factor to adjust it to a local rate somewhere else. and either to adjust to use this location factor, either you use cost of living or what we call cost of labor. What's the difference between cost of living and cost of labor? Cost of living is like the differences between cost of living into two areas. How much does it cost for rent, for food, and so on? Cost of labor is average cost to hire someone in the market or market differences. How much pay do you have to pay someone in an area, right? It's often very correlated, right? The lower cost of living areas tend to have the lower salaries, but not always. For example, a good example is Paris and Berlin. On average, cost of living is potentially a bit smaller in Berlin, a bit lower, but cost of labor, on average, salaries are higher than in Paris, right? So there's difference between the two. And the best way to compute the cost of labor is usually to use our global salary converter. It's a free tool that we have that we can link. Nick, you can put it in the chat that helps you estimate differences in pay between two areas in the world. For example, you know that between London and Barcelona, if you say someone that's earning 60K in London should have a differences, should earn like 27% less in Barcelona, because on average, salaries tend to be 27% lower. And you can do that combination for a multiple list of country, right? On average, Paris, Barcelona salaries tend to be 15% below Paris base one. And also we have a tab that shows employment cost differences, right? How much employer cost will be. And on average, we estimate that employer costs are around 40% in France, like 30% in Barcelona, for example. But maybe Christina is going to talk a bit about that afterwards. So we really recommend you you can use any other source, but we recommend you to use, of course, our global salary converter to estimate the location factor approach to pay people. Let's use an example to ensure that everyone understand this one, right? You're a London-based company and you're looking to hire a front-end developer in Spain. If you know you will pay a front-end developer 59K in London, right? You apply a location factor of 0.73. So it's in fact, once again, the similar approach that what we see in the global salary converter, right? It's minus 27%. So he says, okay, I'm going to pay this person 43K pounds, so 48K euros as a front-end developer in London. That's the approach. And that's the easiest way to do things. You start off salaries in a location you know, and you convert them to salaries in a location you don't know, for example, Spain. However, it's the easiest solution, but it's not the perfect solution because doing this translation, you might miss some local market specificities or differences in markets. Why? Let's have a look at an example. Let's look at salaries for front-end developer. If you look at our market data in London, and this is market data coming from like 1,200 companies, right? So we have 82,000 employees in our data set. This is the market data for a junior front-end developer, intermediate front-end developer, and senior front-end developer in London. 47, 72, and 97K. If you use the methodology I just outlined, those are the salary you should be paying in Barcelona, right? You should be paying 27% less each time. However, when you look at actual market data that we have in Barcelona, it seems that it's close at the junior level, but then it's too high at the intermediate level and really way too high at the senior level. Why? Because in fact, there's differences in markets. Is that London is an interesting market in the sense that salary starts low, but progress super fast, way faster than in Barcelona, in Paris, in Berlin, right? In fact, junior salaries in London are close to Paris and Berlin, and not that a bit, of course, higher than Barcelona, but they explode super fast. People can get salary increases and can job hop from one location to another super high. So this is why using the location factor as an approach has limitation, because if you do that, you will miss out some specificities. In some markets, for example, also a role could be not super high on the market, but could be super high in other areas. So whenever you're going to use the location factor approach, you're going to miss out on local market specificities. And this is why we really recommend you to use local data. Use local data. Of course, I'm going to say use figures data if you want to know what's the best market rates to use. But regardless of what you use, find local market data. If you know for one hire or a few hire, maybe the location factor approach will work. But if you want to start to have a better, more thoughtful and sophisticated approach for hiring into Spain, you need to look at local data, and that is true for every market, by the way. the location factor approach helps you get started, but it's not a viable approach longer term because it will create some of those differences like that. And that's it. Any question? Is there any question? No question in the chat, and I don't see any question on like
I would like
conversation.
to ask something. Maybe it was clear for the audience, but I didn't actually get it. I didn't know about this difference between the labor cost and the cost of living and how you calculate the different factor. Can you maybe explain that again?
Yeah, it's a very good question. Let's go back to the example what we have here: cost of labor and cost of living, and how do you interpret that? Actually, it's a very good example because Barcelona might be a good example of way. Cost of living is really it's an indicator where we use public information like from public indexes, including and some public information like Numbeo to average how much does it cost on average to cost in
That's the
Paris.
one that I know. The cost of
Yeah,
living, like I think that's the one that people should be more familiar with, right?
yeah. So one cost of living is like how much difference is this cost to on a basis to and similar to what you say, it takes into account rent, food, taxi, going out, restaurants, and so on. Cost of labor is average differences in salary on the same role within the market. So the
Okay.
way we compute that on average, and it's a good example. So on average, it's 24% cheaper to live in Barcelona compared to London, but to compare to Paris in this case. But salaries are only 15% lower, meaning that
So
in
you
fact,
would you would say that front-end developer actually live better in Barcelona than they do in London, right?
yeah,
Because the cost of living is is
but
is, is
it's
lower
a
than
better
the
place.
different salary.
It's actually a good point to. It's actually a good point to. This means that cost of living is super low, salaries are a bit higher than cost of living. So it's a good point to be living in Barcelona because you could get a higher salary than the cost of living differential. And similar thing between Paris and Berlin as well, as I was mentioning. Like if you look at Paris, like I was mentioning Paris and Berlin as another example, on average, cost of living is 10% lower than in Paris compared to Berlin, but salaries are 8% higher on average. And the way we compute that, we look at the exact same role, exact same seniority level between all these locations. We look at differences in pay between senior front-end developer in Paris and Berlin, marketing head of marketing between Paris and Berlin, and so on. And we recommend if you want to pay someone fairly compared to the local market to use cost of labor because this is what makes sense to use when you're converting salaries.
Understood. Thank you.
Question for Guillaume from Guillaume. Does it always make sense to always look at the major cities for the country? So it depends, right? There's no one answer into that, but the way to look at it is like the more you want to, the more your market is distributed, the more remote work there is, the less it makes sense to pay talent at a location base, at a specific city based rates, right? Because when you're competing for talent, you're not necessarily, especially in tech roles, when there's a lot of remote work in tech roles, if you're paying someone very low because the person is like in Spain, in Spain location, in a city in Spain that's a very low cost of living, the person could be like, I could find work for someone else working remotely, so you have to pay me at least Spanish based rate, like Barcelona or Madrid based rates, because I don't want my salary to be too low. So on average, especially for roles that are more and more distributed, like tech roles, I recommend you to often look at the highest paying city or like the capital city in each country as a base to pay people, right? Because if you want to localize on those roles at the lowest cost of living area, you might miss out on talent or you might have some of those issues. Any other question? No other question? Then if that's the case, I'm gonna go to the next part of the presentation. I'm gonna give up my rights to moving the slides to Nick or Christina because we're gonna talk on okay, we found talent. We've discussed about how much to pay them, but how do we make it happen? How do we contractualize? And that's over to Christina for this question.
Thank you very much, Virgil. So as you said, so now that we have found the perfect candidate and you know how much you would like to pay them, it's time to send out the offer letter and employ them. So hiring in Spain or in a different country can be rather complicated. As a startup, you have a limited time and resources, and as a new company, you probably don't want to use these precious resources, looking at new offices and areas that are necessary to operate in a new country. So on top of that, you have to hire a legal team to help set up a legal entity and help you understand the employment legislation in that country. So this can take weeks, if not several months, to be able to start employing someone cross-border. So if you want to save time and money and reduce the headaches of figuring all of this out, we recommend basically using a global employment platform like Oyster. Global employment platforms have made it extremely easy to handle all of the complex work around hiring a full-time employee or a contractor in a different country. Essentially, what Oyster platform does is to help you hire, pay, and take care of your team members wherever they are in the world. As an employer, all you need to do is fill out a form on our platform with the important hiring information about the candidates, such as the position, the country of residence, the job title, the job description, the compensation, and the benefits, and we will handle all the rest. We will even tell you the total cost to hire them, including a breakdown of additional costs such as taxes and social security. And in our platform, you can find a cost calculator that it's really easy to use and that will break down you all these costs. So once you have initiated the form and our team has reviewed it, a contract basically can be ready in 24 hours. So if you have any questions during the hiring process, we have a dedicated team that support the customer pre-submission of an hire and post-submitting an hire. So we also then have a dedicated team to guide the team member through the process of being hired, and then a dedicated team to support them with any HR related question that they may have. So throughout the process of working with Oyster, we also provide free training on building a remote work culture for companies and training for remote working employees. So you will find all the information that you need and will support you through the entire hiring process. Now I would like to, as I said at the beginning, I would like to share my own personal experience about being hired through Oyster. But please consider that I'm not a lawyer. I'm not in the position to speak about the intricacies of employment legislation. So basically, after receiving the offer from Oyster, I had my contract ready in 24 hours, and I was able to quickly notify my previous company. The experience, to be honest, was really good because everything was handled online, especially the signature part. It was short and sweet, and usually the signing part is the most complex. And this is what we have noticed even with our customer, and this is one of the most common feedback that we receive because it's really, really easy. For sure, I had some doubts, some questions about contract clause, and they were ready to basically clarify all my doubts and showing a great knowledge about local legislation, and updated me about government facilities for remote workers, as for example the monthly work from home allowance that has been approved by Spanish government after COVID, that consists of 100 euros per month, that in 1 year. I mean, it's good to receive this additional help for remote workers. From the first interactions with Oyster, I had the feeling, to be honest, that I was entering to a company that is really living the new era of employment from all points of view. As I said before, and as you have noticed from my accent and my surname, I'm Italian. And to be honest, if I compare the experience of being hired in Italy in the past as an Italian, so as a local person, to the experience I had in Spain as a foreign, I have to say that in Spain it was much easier and quicker. In Italy, there is a lot of bureaucracy to handle, even for Italians, and it is absolutely the opposite in Spain. I mean, there is bureaucracy in Spain as well, but it's handled in a really agile and quick way. So getting documentation to being hired in Spain is easy, and again, it can be handled online. That it's a great plus. Moreover, if you decide to hire your candidates with Oyster, we work with the trusted partners that can support you in getting ready documentation required, as for example, the social security number. That is something that is needed even for other European people. In Spain, we work with local partner, even from the benefit point of view. This is something that Pedro mentioned at the beginning, because team members are looking for benefit. So we decided to partner with a local partner, and we have an agreement with one of the most innovative benefit provider. So the customers who want to take care of their employees can choose between different packages that are covering not only health insurance, and the agreement is in place is with one of the biggest local health coverage provider, but will also cover the meal allowances, the ticket to restaurants, gym subscription, and public transportation. So they can choose between different packages that are really interesting. So let me know if you have questions about Oyster, and if you would like to know more about how Oyster works and you would like to see a demo, you can reach out to our sales team, and they are happy to help you with any questions related to your global hiring needs.
I have one remark and one question for you both, potentially more Pedro. One remark is that in fact we have been hiring into Spain, and I tried to open a legal entity into Spain to hire people to start with, and I have to share that this is the worst. Actually, I'm not joking, but this is the worst administrative nightmare I've had in my life. So I've had to go notarize documents. We were joking and preparing this call that I felt like I had to give out some of my blood. I have to sign with my blood to get a legal entity. I have to go to Spain to open a bank account. And this is not a joke. Like unless you tell me to, I've been told that I need to get out to Spain to open a bank account. All of this to be able to hire an employee in the next few months. So in the end, we actually did that, but in parallel, we just went and hired the person into through Oyster, and it was a much better experience. We got it done in a week or less than a week, I think maybe. So it was hiring into Spain or opening up a legal entity into Spain is an absolute nightmare. So that was my more the anecdote. And the question I have is because I haven't faced that, but I'm curious to for Spain and overall, and maybe Pedro, you have an insight on that. Is how could candidate perceive to be hired through like Oyster as an employer of records platform instead of being having a contract directly with an employer? Right? Do you see some pushback from candidates? Is there some doubt? Question for Pedro to start with, but Christina, you probably have something to say about this, right?
First of all, sorry about fading into the black, because I don't know what happened with my camera, but all of a sudden it's not working. So yeah. So answering that, I think the biggest pushback that we see is when companies from outside Spain try to hire via contractor, right? As a contractor, you lose some long-term benefit in terms of pension funds in Spain. So most people are a bit reluctant to be contractors. So that's why I believe offering this option of being actually employed by a local company is probably something that candidates or employees actually like. Christina, I know in your experience, what do people say about being
So I
hired through
work
us?
in the hiring team, so I receive some of this kind of concerns from the candidates, but it's more related to the fact that they don't know what a global employment platform is, so they are more reluctant at the beginning about this because it's like they don't understand this third party. But as I said, we have a team that is dedicated to this. So we are since the beginning in touch with the candidate. So after the customer for sure submit the form, and we are available to explain how we work, and then as you said, yes, being a contractor sometimes is not like the preferred options, but as we can employ full-time employee, and they will receive the same benefits and all the pensions and unemployment help. I mean, so when they see that they can be employed as real full-time employee, their doubts basically disappear.
Quite interesting. I have one more question for you, Christina, maybe. And in the meantime, if anyone who's in the chat, you have question, not necessarily regarding only the employment, but anything we discussed or anything related to hiring to Spain, the Spanish market, compensation, benefits, whatever, and so on, please ask those in the chat, right, so that we answer those live. In the meantime, is a question for you, Christina. Can you help people with immigration topic? For example, if there's a UK company that wants to hire someone into Spain, one of the from the UK, can you help with the immigration and visa topics as well?
Again, here we have local partner that support us because we as Oyster we can provide visa directly, but we have local partner that can help in this sense. So it's something that should need to review case by case, but it's something that I mean we can handle. We can
We
find a solution.
we have actually Lauren in the backstage that is employed in Spain and needed like to go through the visa process. Maybe Lauren, you can jump in and share a bit your experience.
Yeah.
Hello. I feel like I've just entered the stage literally. Yeah, for sure. For me, we used a third party lawyer to help with the process, which has been great. The problem that I've faced as a British person is that so many kind of rules have changed since Brexit. So some documents that are needed, for example, to get the card, the identity card, we've prepared all of the documents, and then you get to the place to submit them, and they've been updated and you don't need those anymore. So I would say that one of the challenges that I've faced is being kept up to date with the new regulations that are needed. And yeah, to have that kind of constant communication. If there was a way to for companies to be kind of informed on a regular basis, that would be super helpful. I'm not sure if Oyster kind of supports with that. I know that you work with kind of third parties like local as well, but if there's kind of any communication that you offer for people like myself. I guess direct a question to Christina.
Yes, this should be again. This should be checked case by case, and we usually rely on our partners on for this specific case.
One more question for you, Christina. And I'm sorry, you're
Yeah.
getting all the question and not the intention. No one wants to have question to Pedro and hiring into Spain. Maybe because his camera stopped working. And no one wants to ask question for me on the compensation topic. So I'm a bit angry, but that's not a big deal. But Guillaume said, if I'm being hired through Oyster, will Oyster appear on my payslip or potentially the company that use Oyster for the hiring process?
Yes, I've seen the question. So yes, if you are hired directly by Oyster, in your payslip will appear Oyster Spain. Blah blah blah. So
Okay.
yes.
Pretty interesting. One question for you, Pedro. Even though you don't have your camera, I want to ask you a question, Pedro. I'm not
My
like
microphone actually works, I think.
so which is the most important part in answering question. I have one question that did you see an effect on like local companies in Barcelona or Spain overall? In fact, keep mentioning Barcelona because it feels it's been in the past few years a hot areas for that. But do
Yeah.
they see a bad eye like competition coming from abroad and potentially foreign companies coming and hiring people at very high rates that local companies can't pay in a way?
Yes, that's definitely had an impact on the salaries in the industry and had created problems for some companies not willing or not able to actually update their salary compensation policy. I would say that as an industry, if you like, if we want to grow and be more like France or the UK, we need to accept that, like the international money will come in, big companies will be created in Spain, but also we are going to have international players hiring. You cannot have like the best of both worlds, right? Like keep salaries super low, and then at the same time get the American investor to help you build global companies. So definitely, and for candidates, it's great because they are having more and more options. I think like the usual, like in the past, and it still is, English can be a challenge for some candidates, but now with remote opening this match and international companies hiring in Spain, I think it's more of a concern for every candidate to actually upgrade on their English level.
And you mentioned, was it, did I miss at the beginning, Google opening an office in Malaga? Was it right?
Yeah. If I'm not mistaken, they bought a few years ago a cyber security company, and the founders of this company, which are like really great guys and great folks and great advocates for the city, managed to convince Google to open a big hub for cybersecurity in Malaga. Malaga is also growing a lot as a tech hub.
Is there a specific university or talent pool to explain that, or it's just a beautiful sunshine in Malaga and or the opportunity to ride your bike around the city?
I would say overall, like technical universities across Spain are fairly good, and Malaga is growing a lot as a city. More and more people are finding Malaga like a great destination to live, and I think that is a company that is happening at the same time as companies are also growing there, and local companies. We have a few big local startup going in Malaga. So I think all that is happening at the same time. The growth of the city and the growth of the industry. So everything came together for this specific moment in time.
Yep, I think it's yeah, I'm not surprised, and I think it's going to come more and more in the next few years with the explosion of the ability to work in a remote way or distributed way. I think people will keep flocking into beautiful places to live, like Malaga. I wouldn't be surprised, and beautiful places to ride your bike too as well. But I'm being a bit obsessed by bike at the moment. Question from Celia. For me, Celia, thank you. I was feeling alone. I was feeling very lonely out there, not getting any questions for myself. What do you recommend the position that do not have enough data in figures? Use the local market, the cost of living, labor converter. So, or anything else, right? And so it's a very good question. For any data that you don't feel you have good, there's two things I want to say about that. When you feel you don't have enough good market data, rely on the global market converter, right? Use data in like Paris or London, in Berlin, and translate it into data in like Barcelona or Madrid or whatever to have an estimate, compare it with local market data. And I think this gives you, at least this helps you start from an objective measure, as much as an objective basis as possible. And that leads me to one point is, even when you lack some data, force yourself to start off objective data, start the discussion of objective data when hiring people. Compensation is super important when hiring, to start off objective sources of information and benchmark information. If not, you're going to take biased decision and you're going to take non-objective decision and often decision that will lead to unfairness, starting with the men and women pay gap, right? One of the big reasons for the men-women pay gap, the gender pay gap, is that when there's too much negotiation, on average, we know there's unfairness because on average, at equal role, men tend to negotiate more than women. For example, when starting out, when trying to discuss a starting package, and at equal demands, men tend to obtain what they want more than women. So whenever there's non-objective discussion, it leads to unfairness, and it leads to, on average, a gender pay gap widening. Having said that, so you need to use whatever, either the data you have, either translating data from other location as a good source of information, right? It's a very good point. And to this point as well, as a bit of a spoiler alert, we are going to release something out to help you out in case there's not market data, right? We've been using the AI opportunities that have flourished in the past few weeks and the past few months to be able to help you out in areas where you lack local market data. So figures clients will see in the next few weeks some improvement there in order to get good estimated market data in a lot of places, including in Spain. Any last question from someone from the chat that we can take? Anything else we can answer? nothing else. So I guess it's 5 to 4. We're going to close this webinar there. I hope you liked what you saw. It's going to be recorded. I think you're going to all get an email that's going to help you out. You're all going to get an email with like recording on the event. We're going to follow up with a Spanish hiring toolkit. I think there was a vote in the chat that said that many of you thought it was useful to create this toolkit. So I think we're going to be working on that. And thanks you all for attending. I hope you found it actionable, informative, and it's going to help you hire into Spain the next few weeks, the next few months. Thanks, Pedro. Thanks, Cristina, for attending.
Thank you. Thank you for being the MC too. Thank you for being the MC and for all the marketing teams in the background within this app. Thank you too.
Yep. Thanks to all of you for joining in. And have a great afternoon and great end of the week.
Muchas gracias.
Gracias. Adiós. Bye-bye.
Adiós.
Bye-bye.